Today we're gathering around the campfire with Cheryl, a QHS member whose life is as exciting and grounding as a hike through the mountains. But what trails did she tread to reach these heights? Let's trek into the wilderness and discover the adventures that led Cheryl to where she is today.
What a blessed day for adventure on Terra, where I arrived as an only child. I'm a third-generation Oregonian, so my roots run deep in this beautiful place. I know little of my mother's family history, as both her parents passed before I was born. However, my father's lineage on his mother's branch has documentation back to about 1650. Forwarding to the Revolutionary War, one of his ancestors was a second lieutenant in the 14th New York Militia. My great-grandfather worked for the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, and he came to Oregon around 1900 and worked as a telegrapher and station agent. My parents were both teenagers during the hard times of the Great Depression, and their respective families struggled like so many did. A houseboat on the slough of the Columbia River was the childhood home of my father, as his kin were river people. And the epic fire known as the Willamette Burn broke out in 1933 and destroyed 350,000 acres of old-growth Douglas fir. This spawned a massive reclamation effort to salvage as much timber as possible. And this was facilitated by a rail line ending at a site on the Columbia River near Astoria, where those logs were dumped. My father worked on the boom, helping to tie these logs into large rafts. And my grandfather operated one of the many tugboats that hauled these rafts to mills upriver to process for lumber. My parents met sometime in the late 1930s while roller skating, and this was a really popular pastime for kids in those days. With the Sunday attack on Pearl Harbor, my father enlisted in the Navy as a submariner on Monday morning. He was part of the first training crew for subs out of New London in Groton, Connecticut. My parents shared sweetheart correspondence throughout his service, and she traveled cross-country in 1945 and met him in New York City, where he was on leave, and they were married in the little church around the corner. Coming back to Oregon after the war, my father studied architecture on the GI Bill, but he had to leave before graduating so he could help his family after my grandfather developed brain cancer. Even without a degree, he had a really successful career as a mechanical engineer designing pneumatic systems for industrial operations. Both my parents were creative. My mother was gifted musically, and she played piano from age 4. Accompanying her father, who played harmonica, and they often would entertain in the parlor on Sundays after church. As a teenager, she had operatic voice training for about 4 years, and she would have made that a career, I think, had she had the courage to strike out to San Francisco on her own. But she had another path in the fashion industry. She worked full-time, unlike many women in those days. And she managed to be not only a great cook and gardener, but our house was always tidy. I don't know how she did it. She was part Wonder Woman. Her career was really notable, and she actually worked until age 85. My first 5 years were humble beginnings for my parents, and we lived in a trailer park. I still have a memory of going to the ice house for the big blocks, as we truly had only an ice box to keep things cool. During the daytime while my parents worked, I stayed at the home of my great aunt and uncle, as they were the only relatives close to us. They were wonderful people. Memories of my great aunt's homemade bread and sugar cookies linger. They never owned a car, and my great uncle bicycled daily about 10 miles for work at a lumber mill. And they were master gardeners. My great uncle hybridized iris. And I know it was some of the experiences there that really kindled my lifelong joy of gardening, and probably started with my very own corn plants. My parents bought a home when I was starting first grade, and I could walk about 4 blocks to school. I had a hard time learning to read. I think I was dyslexic and also being ambidextrous, but I settled on writing with my left hand as it was just more comfortable. I think those struggles contributed to my being self-conscious and pretty shy in those days. But for the most part, my childhood was very happy, even if it was lacking siblings to interact with. I was very active, and I played with a lot of kids in the neighborhood. We had open fields very close to the end of where the housing development was, and we would have many adventures. I managed to get in a few scrapes, which resulted in about 3 trips to the ER back in those days. My family was also really great on camping, and we had a lot of trips to many areas in Oregon. And it was really, really special to think back on these times. I really loved it, and it really continued on in my adult life with backpacking and just in general loving to hike and be out in the outdoors and interacting with nature. Perhaps it's being an only child, but I never identified strongly with any particular group. However, I was involved with a lot of activities in high school, the newspaper, gymnastics, running, skiing, and a dance ensemble. After graduating, I enrolled at the University of Oregon, and it was at this time that was the height of the protests on campus against the Vietnam War. It was here that I met my first husband. He was a teaching assistant and completing his doctorate. And we were married the following year when I was 19. And he got a job as a teacher at a junior college in Washington, which took us north. And it was quite a nice time for a while. But it was really a time when I think making a serious decision like marriage and that commitment was just not the thing that I wanted. And we gradually grew apart. So we divorced after 5 years. And it was at that time I moved back to Eugene to live with my great uncle and take care of him, as my great aunt had passed just a few months earlier. And they were so special to me, and I really felt this was a way that I could pay back the great care that I had received when I was a young child. And we had a couple of great years before he passed. He bought a car, and we had a lot of great day trips out and about the countryside. I met my second husband, who was a videographer, while working as administrative assistant to director of Eugene Opera and the Eugene Ballet Company. And it was about this time I made a strong connection with an old friend from my dorm days in college. And this would develop into a career of over 35 years in the juvenile products industry. She was a manufacturer's representative for Snuggly, and they had developed the first baby carrier made commercially in the U.S. And the idea of it was born of a Peace Corps experience in Africa. She resided in Seattle, and I joined with her to be a rep covering Oregon. And through the years, we represented many companies producing great products for babies, children, and parents, and even animal babies. Every day was different and demanded being a problem solver, as a rep is the link between the manufacturer and the retailer. Sort of like the grease that keeps the gears running in the commerce. A vital part of it. Through the years, there were some trips to companies based abroad, and one such was to Sweden for baby Bjorn, where I won the opportunity to make a bowl at Costa Boda, and this was great fun. I'm blessed to have 2 wonderful daughters, the firstborn when I was 35 and the other at 37. Having a tipped uterus caused a failure to progress in labor, and both were delivered via C-section. The only other surgery I had was an appendectomy at 17. However, I had terrible ear infections as a young child, and one resulted in rupturing of the eardrum in my left ear, which somewhat diminished my hearing in that ear. A lingering issue from my teen years is having a mouthful of amalgam fillings and general teeth issues. I'm sure that there is some level of mercury poisoning. In 2017, I developed painful symptoms of osteoarthritis in my left knee and hip, which I got physical therapy for and continue to do exercises daily, as well as chair yoga 3 times a week. And this really helps with keeping flexibility in the area. I was also diagnosed with osteoporosis, and in January of this year, I developed a severe case of shingles that affected my left torso, front and back. And healing has been slow, and I still experience neuropathy in the area. Wearing the QT Wave device past 2 years has been absolutely life-changing. It's helped not only on the physical level, but mentally and emotionally, and it has been the support that I don't think I could have done without on the singular journey that I am on. Being egalitarian by nature and living in an Aquarian state, and with the sign strong in my birth chart, I've worked toward the dream of being a philanthropist for a very long time. I consider it a sacred pledge to my higher self to bring this vision to reality and being an instrument for change. I studied occult literature and astrology for many years, and it was via this connection that I found out about Cardin Group. I knew immediately that Cynthia was a remarkable person, and her vision resonates with me. Of course, this led me to QHS and the wonderful community of people that I'm blessed to be part of. Having a palm reading many years ago prophesies living 2 lives, and I think this is reaching fruition with the beautiful shift that is coming.
Join us on the Prequel, where every story matters and every voice is heard. Because here at QHS, we're all about healing, learning, and growing together.